My mother-in-law excluded me from family trips for years, then invited me only to use me as a free nanny and maid. Here's how I took a stand. I, 29F, have been with my husband Mark, 33M, for 4 years, married for 2. Everything has always been great between us except for one thing. He never takes me with him on his annual family trips. It has been the only bone of contention between us, and I've never been able to figure out why he would exclude me. When we started dating, Mark mentioned his family had an annual vacation tradition, a chance for everyone to get away for a few days. I thought it was a lovely idea, especially since I didn't come from a very close family myself. My parents are divorced and we never had opportunities for traditions like that. I was excited about the prospect of eventually joining in on these family trips. In the second year of our relationship, I expected him to invite me. By then, we were living together and our relationship was serious. But he didn't ask me. I found it a bit odd but brushed it off, thinking maybe he was waiting until we were married to include me. Fast forward to last year, our first year of marriage, and he still didn't invite me. That was when I started to feel deeply hurt. Before Mark left for last year's trip, I asked him why I wasn't invited. He seemed confused and said, "I just assumed you wouldn't want to come." This made no sense to me because I had explicitly told him multiple times that I'd love to join in. I reminded him how much I value family traditions because of my own upbringing and how important it was for me to feel included. That's when he dropped the bombshell. His parents and sister weren't comfortable having me on the trips. He confessed that he had been covering up for them to spare my feelings. They felt having me along would mean they'd need to be extra formal, and that it would be awkward. They wanted more time to get to know me better before including me. I was devastated. But instead of getting angry, I decided to try harder. After all, I got along with them during holidays and visits, so I thought maybe they just needed to feel closer to me. When Mark returned from the trip, I made a plan. Over the next few months, I went out of my way to bond with his family. Even when Mark wasn't visiting them, I made sure to stop by every couple of weeks. I'd bring thoughtful gifts, bake for them, and spend time with his parents and sister. At first, it seemed like it was working. They were polite and friendly during my visits, and I thought I was finally making progress. But apparently, I couldn't have been more wrong. When Mark announced the trip this year, I assumed I'd finally be invited. But when I asked, he got awkward again. After some prodding, he admitted that his parents told him I wasn't welcome because I had been visiting too frequently. They felt I was forcing myself on them and needed to give them space. I was stunned. They had never told me they were uncomfortable. Every visit seemed pleasant, and they'd never indicated they needed a break from me. Mark tried to justify their behavior, saying they weren't used to my level of enthusiasm. But to me, it felt like a slap in the face. After everything I'd done to make them feel comfortable, they were treating me like an outsider. We had a huge fight. I told Mark I wanted him to stand up for me and refuse to go on the trip if I wasn't invited. He said I was being unreasonable and left for the trip anyway. 2 days into the trip, Mark called me. I ignored his first call but answered the second when he texted, saying it was an emergency. When I picked up, I was shocked to see his entire family on the call. His parents, sister, brother-in-law, and Mark himself. They all looked nervous. Mark explained that he had talked to them about how unfairly they treated me. His parents and sister apologized for excluding me and admitted they'd been selfish. They said they wanted to make it up to me by inviting me to join them for the rest of the trip. I was hesitant. I didn't want to put myself in a position to be disrespected again. But after thinking it over, I decided to give them another chance. When I arrived, everything seemed fine at first. They picked me up from the airport, and we drove to a beachside Airbnb. But it wasn't long before I realized something was off. They started making subtle comments about how inconvenient it was to cook and clean at the Airbnb. Then they began delegating chores to me, saying I was the best at these things. The final straw came when my sister-in-law asked me to stay behind the next day to babysit her kids while the rest of them went sightseeing. That's when I realized the truth. They had only invited me to use me as a free nanny and maid. I confronted them that night. I told them I wouldn't tolerate being disrespected like this. After some back and forth, they admitted that my mother-in-law had suggested inviting me so I could help out. They apologized profusely and promised to stop treating me like hired help. But the damage was done. For the rest of the trip, I did nothing. I relaxed, read books, and enjoyed the beach while they cooked, cleaned, and took care of the kids. On the flight home, I had one final plan. I'd secretly arranged for my 2 best friends to join me on the flight. Once we landed, I told Mark I wasn't coming home with him. Instead, I was going on a cross-country road trip with my friends. During the flight, I told Mark I was done. I had already spoken to a lawyer and planned to file for divorce as soon as I returned from the road trip. Mark tried to apologize, claiming he didn't know about his mother's true intentions. But I was done with his excuses. I blocked Mark and his family after the trip. My friends helped me reconnect with my old self and supported me through this tough time. I filed for divorce and began rebuilding my life. The divorce proceedings have been smooth so far since Mark has decided to paint me as the villain and not contest anything. It has been 2 months since the trip, and life feels like it's finally moving in the right direction. After I returned from my road trip with my friends, I officially filed for divorce. The process has been remarkably smooth because Mark, spurred on by his family, decided I was the villain in the relationship. While it stings to see him frame me that way, it has made the legal process so much easier, and for that I'm grateful. After moving out, I found a cozy new apartment for myself. My friends and family have been my pillars of strength, checking in on me constantly and reminding me that I made the right choice. Their visits, phone calls, and late-night talks have been my lifeline. But I'm also focusing on becoming independent again. I've started therapy to work through everything, both the betrayal from Mark and his family and my tendency to prioritize others over myself. Therapy has been eye-opening. I've realized I've spent too much of my life bending over backward to make people happy, even when they didn't deserve it. One of the most beautiful things to come out of this mess has been reconnecting with my childhood friends. The road trip was a turning point. It reminded me of the carefree, confident person I used to be before I let myself become consumed by Mark's world. We laughed, reminisced, and made new memories that will stay with me forever. My friends have even convinced me to revive some of my hobbies, like painting and journaling. It's been healing to channel my emotions into something creative. The settlement negotiations are almost done, and I feel like I'm close to finally closing this chapter of my life. Mark hasn't contested anything, which means I'll walk away with the freedom I so desperately need. What stings the most isn't the end of the marriage but the realization that Mark never truly had my back. He always chose his family over me, even when they were blatantly in the wrong. I was never his partner. I was just someone he could mold to fit his life. Looking back, I'm proud of myself for standing up for what I deserve. For years, I let myself be sidelined and disrespected, thinking that if I just tried a little harder, I'd win their approval. But some people don't deserve your effort, and Mark's family proved that over and over. I don't regret my decision to walk away. I've learned that life is too short to waste on people who don't value you. I deserve better. Better love, better support, and better relationships. As I settle into my new life, I feel lighter. I'm not weighed down by the constant need to prove myself or the exhausting effort of fitting into a mold that wasn't meant for me. I've realized I don't need a perfect family or a picture-perfect marriage to feel whole. All I need is the love and respect of the people who genuinely care about me, and I've found that in my friends, my support system, and most importantly, myself. Thank you for sticking with me through this journey. To anyone reading who feels stuck in a situation where they're not respected or valued, take it from me. You don't have to stay. You deserve to be loved, supported, and cherished for who you are.